Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So then I'm doing IT, and when I go to plug the servers in, they become sentient, and they won't let us access our network unless we forward their chain emails and memes to more and more and more people, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant finds and invites best-fit candidates to apply, so you can discover talent you may have missed. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
From the powerhouse Blowtorch signal of Talk Radio 77 WABC and broadcasting from the center of the universe in America's largest city, New York City, and to the world, welcome to another program which we call the Dr. Sky Experience, Theater of the Mind, ladies and gentlemen, and tonight's adventure will, I'm sure, have you sitting on the edge of your seat. But before we do that, the contact number is always for our 2-hour journey, as we call it again, the Theater of the Mind, 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. And we love the particular conversations that come in the form of dialogue. Who wouldn't? With critical thinking to back it up. Makes for a most wonderful broadcast, in many people's opinions, including myself. To listen to past previous expeditions of the Dr. Sky Experience, check us out at WABCRadio.com or RedAppleAudioNetworks.com. And making it all happen behind the scenes, we thank Tony and Bill, our helmsmen, making sure that this signal is coming to you as good in excellence as you would expect. As the winter storm moves into the New York metro area with heavy snowfall, as you've been hearing the news department report, constantly and accurately with the latest and greatest information, we ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to simply hunker down, do as little driving as you possibly can, and, of course, this storm will pass into history. But great amounts of snow, maybe 18 inches up in the Poughkeepsie area and other areas, into freezing rain and heavy snow. But what about this morning's adventure? In just a moment, we're going to introduce a very special guest on a topic that is extremely timely and has plagued mankind for many, many thousands of years. In just a moment, we'll be introducing you to a brand new guest, Kenneth Paul Callison, and a book that's only days old out there in the world. An apropos subject, ladies and gentlemen, the title of the book, The Way to World Peace, an idea whose time has come. The Dr. Sky Experience usually goes into the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. And just to tag along to some of the science side of what we'll be talking about, many great scientists, of course, like Albert Einstein, have pondered the concept of peace and brought forth many, many ways and solutions to this particular situation. If we go back and look at DNA, does the human DNA have some sort of marker towards conflict and aggression? Who knows, ladies and gentlemen? Right now, as we sit on planet number Earth, believe it or not, there are now 8,271,925,000 souls inhabiting planet number 3, and the beat goes on. The New York metro area, of course, America's largest city with 8.4 million souls, beating out by almost double that of Los Angeles, California, with its alleged 4 million in the world of human souls. Let's talk a little bit about our special guest, the way to world peace, an idea whose time has come. In an era marked by geopolitical conflict, environmental instability, and widespread uncertainty about humanity's future, entrepreneur and researcher Kenneth Paul Callison has written a new work that reframes the world and world peace, not as an idealistic dream, but as an achievable evolutionary step for the human species, The Way to World Peace, an idea whose time has come. A brand new book, ladies and gentlemen, by Wheatmark Publishers, just out as recently as January 20th of this year, is an exploration of how humanity arrived at this pivotal moment and how it can choose a path toward survival, unification, and sustainable peace. Our special guest is the founder of Allied Beauty Experts in Denver. Callison built a nationally recognized company by creating a state-of-the-art online insurance processing system and spearheading initiatives spanning research and development in medical technology, engineering, FDA process work, contract negotiation, and large-scale business management. Callison holds 3 patents in the beauty and medical industries, and he's a visionary leader, as you'll be hearing, dedicated to creating a world free of militarization, poverty, the escalation of global water crises, and widespread environmental degradation. Callison believes right to his core that humanity is capable of profound transformation and that the time to act is now. With that, we go to the great state of Arizona and Sedona, Arizona, where Kenneth Paul Callison is. Good morning and good evening to you, sir. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Well, I appreciate you. The passion for this, it's an interesting background you have, and I think many of the listeners out there will be fascinated by some positivity, because many times we talk in the world of what news, the reaction to the things that are happening around us may not necessarily make us very happy people. Talk about your passion for this before we explore so many of the concepts in your book.
Well, we're living at a point where our technological power has outpaced our wisdom. I've always been interested in this subject. I was raised as a pup, in the sciences and metaphysics and philosophy. So it's always been an interest. I think what kind of set me on that path, as I remember we used to, Steve, in grade school and growing up in the 60s, we'd hide under our desks to protect ourselves from nuclear annihilation. So I think
yes, I remember.
Yeah, I think that kind of drove a point home. I think we're still hiding under our desks.
Yes, and it was called duck and cover. I remember it in Catholic school in New York City when I was just a wee child, and everybody out there who's listening, they know about this. Imagine that, thinking as a child, and who knew? I mean, we never knew what an atomic weapon really was. We heard about it, that formidable and horrible thing, and in school all over the country and all over the world, kids were told, duck and cover from an impending thing. And they had what, Kenneth? They had these things called civil defense. Remember those signs they had at certain locations?
Yeah.
Where you're supposed to hide in like subways or downstairs somewhere in a restaurant or away from the public. It was just a crazy time, a scary time for many, but please continue. I mean, this is fascinating to reminisce about what we thought about nuclear war in the past, but we're certainly not on the path of solving it, as you'll get into.
In fact, my first book was about nuclear war. I was an expert in that subject, and I had corresponded quite a bit with Carl Sagan and Linus Pauling. I did a national survey on nuclear war and published an article in the Journal of Defense and Diplomacy. And so that effort took several years. That was the first book. This book is really what's coming, what's the solution, what's going to happen over the next 40 years, or what could happen.
Absolutely.
Over the next 40 years. And, we still have an issue. We still have 12,500 nuclear weapons. And at one point, we had 50,000, so we'd be safe. We're down to 12,500, but it only takes about 100, depending on the ground-to-air burst ratio and the targets. It would only take about 100 to produce a nuclear winter.
In addition to yourself and your expertise on the subject, I've had a long time ago, Annie Jacobson, you're probably familiar, her book simply entitled Nuclear War. She goes about it in a different fashion, and not to go over her book in detail, people can get it and read it, but her concept was what would happen in a 20-minute period in which our forces or other forces around the world, particularly centered on America, where the president has an awful decision to make when he has to go to the military aide next to him who's carrying this mysterious thing called the football, not something the NFL has. And imagine having to make that decision, Kenneth, yes, no, or way to go, if we think that maybe there's missiles headed toward us, and who knows, maybe it's a flock of birds. It could simply be what? A horrible day for everybody on Earth.
Well, and even in a low-level exchange of a few weapons, you may not threaten the species, but you will collapse the worldwide economy.
Oh, absolutely, and very quickly. You go into this now, I think, of course, since you brought it to the surface here, and I think it's the apropos time. This is very interesting. I think if you look at this whole concept of nuclear weapons and stuff, let's talk for a moment, and I'm reading these statistics here. I did some homework on this to corroborate what you're about to talk about the good side, the way to world peace. But the data that I've gotten here, it says 187 million, people died from war since 1900. But if you look at the big thing, the big enchilada, some 570 million people have died. Now, we don't have death certificates for them. 58 million people were extincted by war from 500 BC to 500 AD, 117 million from 500 AD to 1700 AD. And how about this one? 396 million people from 1700 to 2023 when that statistic stopped. That's pretty big numbers and a horrible story, no doubt. Why can't we all just get along, right?
Well, and you bring up some interesting figures that paint a picture. We basically have been at war for 10,000 years. So at least institutionalized war for 10,000 years. So we really have an issue grappling with our own consciousness. One of those issues is we don't seem to value our species. We haven't yet decided if we're worthy enough to survive.
Interesting.
There's also a denial and addiction process involved in this.
You know, I want to bring up something as we go deeper into your book here. I encourage people to get this book. And by the way, congratulations. This has only been out officially in people's hands as of what? Just a few days ago? Am I correct?
Yep.
Wow. That's a big accomplishment. And this is your third book, or did I hear you correctly?
Second. The first book wasn't published. It was a little controversial, but this is the second book, which is kind of a blend between the first and the second.
Well, this is interesting, Kenneth, as we talk here. President Trump, of course, involved in this big circle of something called the Board of Peace. And I'm reading this here to the listeners. Maybe many of them know this. Actually, the entire charter was signed on January the 22nd of this year. But I think we do have clip number 1 to identify a little bit more about what's going on. Efforts from the president's side, as you people may say yay or nay to what he's doing. But if it's going to help us cull wars and stop them, let's see if we can play clip number 1 and hear a little bit more about the president's Board of Peace.
Originally envisaged as a small group of world leaders overseeing the rebuilding of Gaza, Donald Trump's Board of Peace has since become a more sprawling concept, with invitations sent to dozens of nations. The preamble of its charter also hints at the organization's role as mediator in conflicts around the world.
Do you want your Board of Peace to replace the UN?
Well, it might. I mean, the UN just hasn't been very helpful. I'm a big fan of the UN potential, but it has never lived up to its potential.
Trump will be chairman. He alone decides who is allowed to join and can only be replaced in case of voluntary resignation or as a result of incapacity. He will lead an executive board of 7 members, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Trump's special negotiator Steve Witkoff, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. A Gaza executive board will operate under the body. At the bottom of the hierarchy lies the only Palestinian component, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, tasked with managing day-to-day operations. Countries joining so far include Trump allies Hungary's Viktor Orban and Argentina's Javier Milei, as well as the UAE, Turkey, Egypt and Canada, though with the latter saying they will not pay the $1 billion price tag to become a permanent member. Netanyahu also agreed, despite earlier criticizing Turkey and Qatar's inclusion in the Gaza Board Committee.
Turkish soldiers and Qatari soldiers will not be in the strip. We have a certain disagreement with our friends in the United States regarding the composition of the advisory council that will accompany the processes in Gaza.
Other countries, including France, Norway and Sweden, have ruled out joining over concerns the board would seek to replace the United Nations. China confirmed it has been invited, but said it would defend the international system with the UN at its core. Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, said it would be very hard to be a member of a council alongside Russia. Britain echoed that statement, saying it was concerned that Vladimir Putin had been invited.
The Board of Peace, an iteration from UN Resolution 2803. Kenneth Paul Callison, talk a little bit about that, because as we get into your book, what do you know about that you can share with this audience? And I'm interested to hear this.
Well, it's a good idea. It's a step in the right direction. We still have to see how it's going to unfold. It may very well be subject to a lot of political influence. So the idea of peace and having a different consciousness and a different behavior is not new. I mean, Mahatma Gandhi and Christ and Buddha and a number of our leaders, Abraham Lincoln, and even musicians like Paul Simon, have told us the same kinds of things for a long time. We're just now beginning to understand that this is a possibility. I do agree that, the UN has tremendous potential, but it's never really lived up to the hope. That part of that is because the 5 permanent members, any one of them can veto anything.
Yes.
And of course, the UN has no enforcement ability either. So they're kind of hamstringed.
It's an interesting analysis. Yes.
Go ahead.
Please continue.
I would say that judging from or approaching this from a metaphysical point of view, or a philosophical point of view, humanity signed a contract with the universe a long, long time ago, and it only had one requirement, and we still haven't done that, and that is to behave honorably.
I love it.
The only thing.
Yeah, I love it, and I think everybody listening, right?
Yeah.
Everybody listening, if you have a disagreement with that, how would anybody argue the other side? I'm sure people could, but you're right. And that's what's amazing. And I threw this out there before. I think you heard it clearly. Does our DNA have some sort of a marker towards conflict and aggression? I'm not the biologic expert on that. But I mean, does that sound ridiculous to you as a man who studied the metaphysical side or even the science side? Is there something in our DNA that if they could take it out, we would simply not be this aggressive species, and who knows, maybe there's populated, universes out there that have other kinds of beings, and hopefully they don't have the same problem, right?
Well, I actually believe the opposite. I believe peace is hardwired into our DNA.
I would love to have agreed, yeah, okay.
So the issue is, well, then why are we violent? Are we violent because that's our nature? Or are we violent because we're in denial of our nature? Because we don't yet know who we are?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Violence is an acquired mutation, and that's born from historical survival instinct, but that no longer serves us. So we are actually spiritual organisms that thrive on connection and equilibrium and so forth, but we're trained to respond to fear. So hatred and anger and violence are learned behaviors. They can be unlearned.
Oh, I love it. And I think that's why we have you here. The book entitled simply this, The Way to World Peace, an idea whose time has come after all the people that have tried in the past, and there are many great people that we could talk about. Time doesn't permit. The Dalai Lamas, Mother Teresa, Dr. King, Gandhi, Jesus himself, and obviously Paul in the Bible, all these people that espoused, and at least from what we read, and, for those that knew some of these people, that was a step in the right direction, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's amazing. Let's talk here before we go to the bottom of the hour, and always remind our listeners out there, you're part of this conversation. Theater of the mind is what it is, but yet, ladies and gentlemen, little doses of positivity on a magnitude that's fantastic here. 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222. What's your feelings, ladies and gentlemen, about the direction of the world? Obviously, many would say, there's nothing we can do. That's the way things are. Well, I don't agree, and I know our special guest, Kenneth Paul Callison, would obviously not argue the difference. He would explain the difference. Let's go back to humanity's extinction here. We look at the entire world, some of which we didn't have any, responsibility for, asteroidal impacts and so many volcanic things that changed the shape of the earth. But let's talk about, in your opinion, where we're headed, and not to alarm people, but to tell them the truth. What do you believe about humanity's extinction, and how close is it, and could it be?
It is possible. It's unlikely, but it certainly is possible. We have 4 major threats right now. By the way, you're familiar with the doomsday clock.
Yes, I am. Please describe that to people who are not, because that's fascinating, by the atomic scientists a long time ago.
The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists after World War II and the creation of nuclear weapons. That was a clock with a time set several minutes to midnight, and then that midnight is the extinction event. But that handpiece moves back and forth slightly. In times of high conflict, it's much closer to midnight. So to give you an idea, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the clock was at 7 minutes till midnight. And today, it's at 90 seconds to midnight.
No, that's a powerful statement that you've just made, and nobody would deny that. It's just totally amazing, my friend, because when you look at that, you mentioned before some 12,000 plus ... nuclear weapons, not necessarily the tiny but yet very destructive original fission bombs. These are thermonuclear weapons, and it just seems like we keep pumping them out like sausages. Isn't that what's happening all over the world out of fear or whatever the reason? Obviously, we know why we have them, but is that really the whole concept? We'll get into the details of the horrors of nuclear war. This is interesting, Kenneth. I had a guest here on one of my programs a long time ago, and you probably know the name, you do, and the audience does. Daniel Ellsberg. I spent some time with him and talking about something very interesting. People may recognize him for the Pentagon Papers. He passed away in 2023 very quietly from pancreatic cancer, bless his soul. But the book that he wrote was called The Doomsday Machine. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but in the interview, he explained to me something that really stuck with me. He said, I was in front of President John F. Kennedy, and I was sitting in the White House in the Oval Office, and the president, looked at me and said, tell me, because he was a researcher like at the Rand Corporation or something in the statistics. He showed the president this hockey stick diagram of what would happen in an all-out nuclear war. And he said within 24 hours, there'd be over 350 million people on Earth, not just America. They would be vaporized off the earth, and the president looked at him and said, by God, we got to get rid of these damn nuclear weapons. But that was just a statistic, but talk about that for a minute, because it's a fascinating subject before we go to the hard break, and I'm sure the callers are going to light up the phones. Talk a little bit about that.
About the potential for a nuclear war?
Absolutely. It's just, as you said, the countdown clock is, 90 seconds to that moment, and it's so horrible. There you go. What if somebody just has a hair trigger? It could happen. And the way the world is now, not to be a doom and gloomer, please continue on that thought. I mean, it's inevitable, sadly.
Well, nuclear weapons have a number, I don't know how you would say it, properties, or there are a number of truths about nuclear weapons. They're dangerous. They hold humanity back from progress just by their very nature. They're susceptible to failure because they're born from fear, and they're unnecessary because we already know what we need to know to get rid of them.
You bet.
Absolutely. It's difficult for societies to give up their arms or to risk peace, because there is a risk to peace. But it's not just the nuclear weapons that threaten our existence. And of course, they're subject to panic or miscalculation, or a third world country then becoming another member of the club. Mm-hmm. So there is a way to de-escalate all of this, but there's still other factors that are causing that doomsday clock to be at 90 seconds to midnight.
And we're going to have to get into that as we continue here with our very special guest, Kenneth Paul Callison. A book, ladies and gentlemen, that we recommend that you go out and take a look at for good, obvious reasons, entitled The Way to World Peace, an idea whose time has come. And imagine, ladies and gentlemen, the horror that an American president has to make a decision. And as Annie Jacobson said in her book, Nuclear War, she centered it around the 20 minutes when a launch would be made by another country around the world. Is it a real threat? And you have to think quickly the president has to respond with the military aid with something called a football. And our Russian counterpart, if that was the Russian that we're talking about, on their side, they have their military officer working with a little suitcase called a chicket. That and much more on the Dr. Sky Experience with you, ladies and gentlemen, at 1-800-848-9222. We will be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved, that is, by understanding. A quote from the great Albert Einstein. 32 minutes after the hour as we move deeper into winter and we move deeper into the month of January. Our very special guest, all of our guests have great information, as you tell us, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a question or comment that you'd like to make here, we will get to the callers in a moment. The contact number is always 1-800-848-9222. And email me for your questions and concerns at just drsky@wabcradio.com. Welcome back, Mr. Callison. Let's continue with the callers here. The phones are lighting up as we would expect with this important subject. Let's say good morning to Melvin in the Bronx. Good morning. You're on with Kenneth Paul Callison. How are you doing this morning?
Yes. Based on the subject you're talking about, it's all about everybody on this rock called planet is a human being. All you gotta do is treat each other like you yourself want to be treated. Christopher Columbus wrote that in his joke. We have met the day they are peaceful. We must teach about words and make work for us. It's all about greed and exploitation. He also wrote in his journal, we are able to communicate with the natives. They tell us about the Africans they trade with. We see the ships, the record ships, but we cannot catch them. And when King Ferdinand was slain, it put the proclamation in 1501 in place that all Africans taken out of Africa we brought out in chains, educating Christianity, told them that lay the ground for the message going today. Because people refuse to recognize that we are all human beings out there. It's due to greed and exploitation. And until you wake up, that's why people come here. When you read the Declaration of Independence, then you understand what Fergus is talking about, the hypocrisy of it. That's why the war was fought in 1865, because that war is still being fought today.
I hear you. Kenneth, a very interesting and right-on caller who's talking about why basically we should all treat human beings, obviously, with the dignity that they should have and judge the person by their character. But your response, if there is one, and we appreciate your call, Melvin. Kenneth, interesting as we light it up there.
Well, I think it was Jimi Hendrix that said, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, we shall know peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fascinating subject here. And let me ask you this straight up. Is it necessarily, and I'm not judging here, I'm just using a terminology here, the word pacifist. Is there some way that identifies 100% with what you're talking about, or not necessarily everybody who's a pacifist is also in the same way about this whole thing about getting world peace? I mean, do you have to define pacifist better to fit into the picture? I think I know what it is, but describe that. Can you be a pacifist and still have not necessarily 100% belief in world peace? I don't know. Maybe that sounds ridiculous. What say you?
No, I think you can.
Okay.
The foundation, the book is just one pillar to the foundation. Mm-hmm. The foundation is a timeforhumanity.org. But the principle of the foundation is, and the concept here is, we need to unite humanity in order to save us from ourselves. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of the principle behind the foundation. But this idea of pacifism is fine, but we intend on running peace as a business, just like a war is run as a business. So this is a very active campaign. It's basically a revolution within a peace movement. So peace is not passive.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Or it doesn't need to be passive. It can be very active. But we have to become educated and aware and then empowered, and then we have to take action.
Well, I'm going to go on a limb here and ask you a tough question here. Do you think religion is doing enough to provide us this path to peace? Or, I was raised a Catholic. That's my thing. And I know all the times in school, all the things we talked about by the scriptures. But is that, in your opinion, and maybe that's a loaded question, but is religion doing as best a job as it can to bring about world peace? Well, what say you to that?
Well,
it's interesting.
Actually, we do address that in the book. But
okay.
So, in my opinion, religion is basically the commercialization of spirituality. And there are many different religions. And it's a little hard to understand why there have been so many religious wars. They're typically the most violent. So the species engages in killing other members of its species because they have different ideas on what God is.
Sure. That's incredible.
So religion is supposed to heal us and reassure us and provide a path. And I'm sure in many cases it does, but more on an individual level.
Right, and I'm asking you, and I know you understand what I'm saying, but for everybody listening to this, I'm saying, in other words, for all the religious groups out there, whatever faith you are, ladies and gentlemen, we have respect. I'm not, demonizing or chastising anyone in any faith they have. But I wonder, with the collection of revenue to make these different religious organizations in existence, obviously they have the tax-exempt status, at least here in this country, at least that's what we believe. But I'm just saying, I wonder how much of that, it's like in many companies that are talking about helping the poor, how much goes to the bottom line, to the corporation, and how much really goes back to people. And if money's the driving force, I think you see where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah, and I believe that religion, spirituality, enlightenment, those are tools that we can use to affect this change.
And I guess what I'm adding finally, and we're going to continue with you and the callers because that's the most important part of these conversations in Theater of the Mind. So what I would say is the spirituality that a person can have, wouldn't it be also agreeable that you may not necessarily just have to attend a church service or some kind of a congregation every week? Shouldn't that spirituality come from the self in its own path? That's not necessarily going back. If you want to go to church every Sunday, God bless you. But the point is, what I'm saying is simply that spirituality, it should come from ourselves on our own journey toward that whole concept of peace. The kindness and the acts we can do on our own, I think, are far more powerful than if somebody's telling us that this is the way to do it. What say you?
I would agree with you. Mm-hmm. You can't really have peace in your external world if you don't have it in your heart.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Maybe it takes me a long time to get to the finish line, but the point is, I've experienced this. I'm not going to bore the audience with my journey, but, to everybody out there, I'm just saying simply, I think you've said it way better than anybody. Your own individual spiritual journey to do good doesn't necessarily have to be coming from a location where you have to hear the same things as if you have to have it inculcated into you. Obviously, we need help, but I think if more people were along that path, I think that would be a very progressive way to bring about peace and happiness. As the other gentleman was calling before, Melvin, I think what he was saying is, I think I heard it, and I think you did, is that, we need to treat human beings with the respect that they deserve, but obviously judge them on their character, not on anything else. So that's an interesting story.
The concept of honoring your neighbor, other animals that live on this planet, and the planet itself.
Yeah, this is interesting. And talking about other things, not necessarily saying religion as being the business, I'm not really saying that. But why do you describe that war, and how is the war concept a business to you? I think I get it, but I think the audience may need a little bit of direction on that. How would you respond to that? That war obviously is a big business. Look at all the money spent.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And what Eisenhower referred to as the military-industrial complex is now much more diverse. It's now the military, industrial, corporate, political, educational, and media complex. Mm-hmm. So that has congealed into a fairly large force.
Yeah.
And
right.
basically it survives and it accelerates because it's basically part of an addictive cycle. So if you look at addiction, say alcoholism,
sure,
that addict will have a number of excuses on why he drinks. Oh, it's not that bad. I can quit whenever I want. Everybody drinks. I'm just having fun. I only drink because I'm under stress. And whatever, if he runs out of excuses, his codependent then jumps in and helps. Well, he only hits me when he's drinking, and da-da-da-da-da.
Yes.
And so that codependent is on the same roller coaster. They get the same highs and lows and thrills of riding that in the car with that addict. Exactly. So here we have the addict in the militarization of the world are the governments. They are the addicts because they and the military, industrial, political defense network are the drug pushers. They make their money off of selling this to the addicts. The addicts are completely addicted to the false sense of security and the power and the show of force.
Exactly.
And the pride. And they have excuses. Well, we can't achieve peace. Peace is impossible. We have to do this because our enemy's going to do this. So then you have the population that are the codependents. They buy into this. They make up excuses for the behavior of their own governments. So it's really an addictive cycle.
It's interesting the way you say it, Kenneth, because, look, I'm a proud American. I'll say it to the day I die. I want to see America strong. And look, if you look at the, letter agencies out there in the government, the Defense Department, and the Department of War, I should say more accurately, you look at how many, $800 billion in expenditures. And I'm not saying that we don't need a strong America. Many people out there would, I'm sure, agree here as we talk about this as we move into the latter part of January. But what's fascinating here is, you're right, we're doing it because the other side is going to do something, and we have to go more and more and more. And where does the, like the Temptation song, the world's a ball of confusion, and not to be poetic, but this whole conversation I think is fantastic. 1-800-848-9222. If we haven't gotten to Alexi in Queens, and of course Stu in Brooklyn, and you, ladies and gentlemen, at 1-800-848-9222. Lots of time to discuss this interesting subject. With who? Our special guest, Kenneth Paul Callison. His book, just out a few days, The Way to World Peace, an idea whose time has come. We will be right back. Stay tuned.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
World peace must develop from inner peace. Peace is not just mere absence of violence. Peace is, I think, the manifestation of human compassion. The words in a quote from the Dalai Lama. 47 minutes after the hour, as we move through time and space, we continue with our special guest, Kenneth Paul Callison. An interesting book, ladies and gentlemen, to give you a new perspective on ways to simply find peace, your own peace, and the way to world peace. Subtitled, An Idea Whose Time to Come. Kenneth, let's go to the callers. Let's say good morning once again to Alexi in Queens. Alexi, thank you. You're a regular caller. How are you doing this morning?
Good evening, Dr. Sky, and a very good evening to your guests.
Thank you.
If I may, 3 very quick points. Number 1, the whole principle of the belligerency and the bellicose nature of humanity is very simple. We're a new offspring from the long train of evolution. We've only been around a few thousand years. Our history is dotted with one war after another, a brief peace, and then one war after the other. The Chinese had a way of describing it. They took one of their characters, the written characters, some 4,000 years ago when they began, and they assigned it a value, the value of self, of me or I, and the character is an image, picture, and the graphic is a hand holding a sword. we don't know if that is aggressive or passive or what, or defense or attack. Mm-hmm. This is intriguing because it's the dual nature of humanity, no matter who you are. The second point, quickly,
go ahead,
is very simply that war sometimes brings peace. We have many wars, like, for example, the war with Japan. It lasted for quite a while, but unfortunately, you have the issue of the atomic bombing of the island of Japan. Yet, out of that came a country that was living in the 15th century under old, cruel rules and dictates under the emperor into a country now in the 20th century, a rival to even the United States.
Interesting. Kenneth, your response. Alexei brings to every week, he brings some insightful commentary and opinions. And what would you say back as a response?
Well, it's not that war or conflict hasn't solved some things in the past, but we are in a different time now where we can't continue that same pattern. And Alexei also brought up the concept of evolution. So we are under the, I would say, mistaken belief that evolution creates intelligence. You know, as the eons go by, we become smarter. And that's not really the way it works. Intelligence existed long before mankind. Intelligence is what created the universe. Intelligence exists in human beings and plants and animals and basically everything, because that was from the creation. So as we avail ourselves, as we open our hearts, as we allow intelligence into our being, then we evolve. So evolution doesn't create intelligence. Intelligence creates evolution. And evolution is not something that happens to us. Evolution is something we control. We can plan our own evolution.
Well said. Alexei, you got the last word. As our callers, we try to give them an opportunity to respond back. And if you do that, we're kind of pressed for time, but please go ahead.
Yes, very simply, the last point I'm bringing up is this paranoid fear that people have about, we're going to have nuclear war, we have these nuclear rockets and things. Number one, no one is that insane. No one has gone beyond that limit to start it. You have to start it. You cannot just suddenly say, it's time for a nuclear war. No, you have to
Well, Alexei, I may take exception to you in a respectful way. I'm saying, look at it this way. If, let's say, some dictator or some individual, doesn't have to be a dictator, just somebody that you and I may not like, if they're kiltered off, they're not balanced at all, that's what we're talking about here, too, and not to alarm people. Look at what could have happened with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and not to go into it, Kenneth, I know you and I both know this, and maybe Alexei, but the listeners may not know that we came exceptionally close to being wiped out by this whole experience if the Kennedy brothers and others didn't have the ability to try to negotiate, because a Russian or then Soviet submarine was sitting down there with a nuclear-tipped torpedo, and our forces were sitting on top, and the political officer on board the submarine was trying to contact the Kremlin with Khrushchev. And they had some kind of a problem, but it was thank God the captain or the commander of that submarines did not launch that, because what would have happened, right, Kenneth? We probably all wouldn't be around today, and particularly anybody who lives in the New York area and other parts of the world. It's a sad story.
Well, I would agree with you. We have come close a number of times.
Yes.
And I really truly believe that you and I are sitting here today because of two people primarily, John F. Kennedy and Carl Sagan, because we were getting very, very close to playing around with it to see what would happen.
Mm-hmm. No, it's amazing.
Of course, Carl Sagan came out with his theory on nuclear winter, and that changed it again.
Yes.
Before we began to understand the consequences.
Yes, you're right. And in the simplest way, Alexei, obviously you're very intelligent and you bring good points to the table, but, what happens if you have somebody that just decides, what if it's in one of these terror organizations and somebody says, who knows, we just want to go out there and we know it's the end. We could care less, but yet we're going to detonate something or do that. in the deep dark of the night, obviously you would want to have some protection. That's why we have what we have. But the whole concept is we're trying to bring forth the subject of how do we move toward world peace. Thank you, Alexi, for your call. Let's move forward here. We're trying to go to the caller board here. And if we don't get to you, ladies and gentlemen, we're kind enough, and hopefully you are, to stay with us. Let's say good morning to Stu in Brooklyn. You're on with Kenneth Paul Callison. Thanks for your patience.
Good morning, gentlemen. I want to give you my quick executive summary of my background very quickly.
Yes, sir.
I have a birthday coming up. I will be 89. In another life, I was served as a maritime counterterrorism specialist. I also had the privilege as a newly minted ensign of being assigned to a ship called USS San Marcos. For 60 years, under penalty of court-martial, what we did was a deep, dark secret. Of course, I go on and I find the whole story there. The San Marcos brought 5 Walton M41 tanks to the Bay of Pigs. I was there. And the point of this conversation is one of the guys who was brought in as a consultant was a Marine colonel. Guy looked like he was from Central Casting. Quentin Jordan, ex-Marine colonel with all the fruit salad because he'd been in every major landing in the Pacific.
A guy with the right stuff.
One of the geniuses from the CIA that they had chosen a place to train the Cubans in a town where the mayor was an ardent communist. They lost all of the advantage of surprise. They knew we were coming, was doomed to failure. He was told if he went public with that, they'd ruin his life. Now, the point of this is the problem that you have in the world as far as peace is an obvious one. It's called evil. Who has the means, the tools to confront it? Governments. Governments are made up of people. And like the people who were ill-advised in the Bay of Pigs, including the 3-star Air Force officer named Charles Parker Cable, who was forced out of the service at Kennedy's behest. And I'll add a little story about that very quickly.
Yes.
So you've got the stupidity that impacts everything that's done in government.
Well, Stu, I have to cut you short here, and I don't mean to do it purposely, but we have to. The clock runs. The clock will run out. But first of all, thank you for your service. I'm fascinated by this story, and one time I'd like to get into a conversation in depth with people who obviously have some experience, like yourself, with the whole Cuban Missile Crisis. But in respect to our guest, Kenneth Paul Callison, he's talking about the dangers of nuclear war, and one way when the American and atomic scientists say that 89 seconds or 90 seconds to that eventful and horrible event could happen. Stu, thank you for your call. I want to have Kenneth respond to this because we're almost out of time.
Well, I would point out, and actually the caller had some good points, but peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the management of conflict, whereas war is the absence of management.
Interesting way to look at it. Yeah.
And it's not just, even the previous caller, Alexei, was saying, well, we'll never engage in a nuclear war. This is, again, a response it's kind of an addictive response. That'll never happen. But there are actually, I do agree that it's probably, even as horrible as it is, it's probably not our biggest threat. So we have on this planet terrible poverty. About a third of the world lives in poverty. We've got 471 million children in war-torn areas learning war. It's a little bit hard to understand why a third of the world lives in poverty. The other 2/3 builds weapons to kill each other. But besides the poverty, we have an impending water crisis that is actually probably our largest threat.
Absolutely. And these are the big things that we need to talk about. But again, apologies to you and the listeners out there as we have to go to the top of the hour here. Hour number 1, ladies and gentlemen, just has expired almost. But we continue with Kenneth Paul Callison. Your questions. Jack in New Jersey, stay with us. Michael in New Jersey. And ladies and gentlemen, your opportunity to ask questions and participate in what we call the Theater of the Mind. 1-800-848-9222. as we move, ladies and gentlemen, to some very interesting topics. When we return in hour number 2, I'd like to get into, with our special guest, more of the dynamics behind what he talks about. There's so many chapters in his book, a great book that I recommend, and certainly many people out there. Whether you're in the religious circle, whether you're in the political circle, whether you're in the business circle, something that everybody can learn about concepts of a way. Wouldn't that be amazing? The way to world peace. I'm Steve Cates. This is the Dr. Sky Experience. We're on the powerful powerhouse signal of Talk Radio 77 WABC. Proud to be here behind this microphone, and we will be back with hour number 2.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we are back here, ladies and gentlemen, from the powerhouse blowtorch signal of Talk Radio 77, proudly broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City, and America's #1 most populous city, where some 8.4 million people are out there, and I'm sure many are listening, not only to the weather, ladies and gentlemen, but this particular powerhouse. We continue with our special guest, Kenneth Paul Callison, a brand new book, a book that offers hope, The Way to World Peace, an idea whose time has come. Thank you, and we appreciate you so much, Kenneth. Let's talk a little bit more before we go to the callers that were still from hour number 1. You talk about human consciousness is evolving. This is a powerful subject, and it goes deep. Now we move into some of the solutions that you bring forth in the book. Talk about that.
Well, of course, we have certain existential physical threats, but we also have spiritual threats. And one of the things that may be our greatest threat is the loss of joy and the loss of belief in ourselves, the loss of belief in the future. Many decades ago, we had a much more difficult time existing, but we looked to the future with great anticipation. And now it's the reverse. It's much more convenient and easy. Our lifestyle is much better, but our view of the future has changed. So consciousness, we have to elevate our consciousness, and that requires enlightenment. So basically, if you want, from a metaphysical standpoint, you can't really have peace in your external world if you don't have it in your heart. We have to learn to make decisions with our heart. And if you want to manifest this, then it's a 3-step process. You envision and dream of peace. Secondly, you know it to be true and accept it as your reality. And the third part is you release it.
Wow. Could it be possible, though, that our loss or evaporation of joy could be tied to how much people, and myself and everybody out there who's so dependent nowadays on this little thing called a computer, and then transitioning to the big one, the AI concept here? I mean, we don't want to become cyborgs. I don't want to be one. I don't think anybody out there in the listening audience wants to be one. But could it simply be that the lack of joy or the loss of joy is due to all this technology sometimes that's overpowering us?
Well, I think people have this overwhelming feeling that the world is spinning out of control. Mm-hmm. And for a while, technology offered us a number of advantages and freed us from a number of burdens. But technology won't solve this problem.
Interesting.
So it, in fact, may make it worse. Before the break, we were talking about a couple of other things, like the impending water crisis. So,
yes, please continue on that. Sorry to have lost the
no problem. But by the year 2040, it's estimated that basically half of the world will not have access to clean water. Now, that'll start a war. That will start a war.
You bet. Food, water,
everything.
Living conditions. I mean, the lack of homes and the lack of being, simply poverty all out. How can you do anything if you have no food and you have no water, especially? You're right.
Yeah.
That's a horrible thing.
You can live 3 days without gas in your car, but you can't live 3 days without water. So,
well, later in the program, we're going to actually play, and it'll be just a moment, not now, but We have a message from Stephen Hawking before he passed away about why, and we talk always here on this show, majority about space science and the technology there, that we need, in his opinion, to remove ourselves, as I mentioned at the top of the show, some 8.2 billion souls, and they're popping in here. Looking at the numbers here, it's like we're getting a few hundred every minute. Isn't that incredible? His particular, idea was to move off the planet. It seems like a very interesting goal, but it's something that obviously will probably have to take place in the future based on things. Let's go now to the callers. They've been patient there. We always want to respect them. Let's say good morning if he's with us. Jack in New Jersey. Good morning. You're on with Kenneth Paul Callison.
Good morning, Dr. Sky, and it's fascinating to hear this discussion. I've learned a lot already, and I'm going to stick with you to see how much more I can learn. Kenneth's book is the agenda of this discussion, but I'm a little confused, Dr. Sky, about whether you want to restrict the conversation to the subject of nuclear weapons and how precariously we are close to the end of the world, or whether this is going to be a discussion of the philosophy of peace or the economics of peace and war, or a very pragmatic discussion about how to make an improvement. I'm just a little confused. If you will guide me, then I'll adjust my remarks accordingly.
No. I mean, look, let me say this. In the limited time we have of our guests, not to be defensive at all, here we go. If you'd like to talk more about that, to address the questions to our guest, please continue. I don't want to restrict conversations. If you have a specific question about the nuclear crisis in the world, please go for it, and then we'll have him respond, and I appreciate you. Go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you very much. And I would just like to start the ball rolling by dropping a few famous quotation bombs. So I'll start with Archibald MacLeish. People always get the government they deserve. Now I'll move to Carlos Santayana. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Now the words of President Eisenhower on his last day in the White House, while he was cleaning out his desk, he famously said, "Beware the military-industrial
complex." You're very correct. Absolutely. Yes, Kenneth, I think this is interesting what Jack's bringing up. We're not trying to restrict conversation, but we now have you to respond to him. Go ahead.
Well, and the caller brought up some interesting points. Is this just about the potential for nuclear war or other threats? Mm-hmm. And there is, and he also brought up the question about the economics of peace. And certainly, peace has a infinitely higher rate of return than an investment in war does. Basically, we're trying to solve these problems like poverty and collapse of the ecosystem and the impending water crisis while we're killing each other. That's like trying to have a dinner party while the house is on fire. So,
right, yeah.
And then of course we
very
deny
well
the house
said,
is on
right?
fire.
Well put.
You know, no, the house isn't on fire. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but it sure the hell is, right?
Yeah, it is. So there is the one thing we didn't discuss is the environment, and it's not simply global warming or climate change. Mm-hmm. We are in the middle of the Holocene epoch, which is a geological epoch, and the ecosystem is collapsing because we are damaging it at about 1,000 times the natural rate. And this may be our biggest threat, because if we destroy the ocean, we're toast.
Yes.
And we're getting fairly close. So we've got about 40 years to fix this.
No, it's right. It's the life cycle of us too, with the thing from photosynthesis, plankton. We could go on for hours. But let me thank Jack as we move forward here. This is very interesting. These mass extinctions, and you're saying again, give us that information again, what you just said, because I don't think everybody heard that clearly about what's happening.
Well, the collapse of the ecosystem is multifaceted and complicated and involves a number of things. So it's not just global warming. We're in the middle of the Holocene epoch, and there have been 5 previous mass extinction events. And I think it was the Permian where the ocean basically died, and that caused the extinction of all life on Earth.
Well, you're right. The Permian had 95% of that living, anything living matter, animals and such, were extincted 250 million years ago. This is incredible. We study this all the time. One of the reasons for the audience to understand is intense volcanic activity increases, great increases of methane and carbon dioxide, and there was a rapid global warming way back then. So oxygen was removed from the oceans. That you're right on. This is interesting. But somehow, as we always say, Mother Earth has this healing capability. Not that we should pollute, but please continue. This is something to bring people's attention, and I think it's important.
Well, I think what it comes down to is there's this schism that's developing between those that are concerned with the threat of man versus those that are concerned with the threat to man.
Yep. This is fascinating stuff, and let's see if we can do clip number 2 here in just a moment, because this is something that Stephen Hawking, the great physicist, astrophysicist, had talked about. And without going into so many of the things that he gave us from the black holes and the whole concept of all this, the multiverse and all that, let's hear what Stephen Hawking's, statement was about why we need to leave planet Earth because of these things that you're talking about, our guest, Kenneth Paul Callison. Let's go to clip number 2. Well, it doesn't look like we have...
that humans need to leave Earth and make a new home on another planet to stay risks annihilation. It could be an asteroid hitting the Earth. It could be a new virus, climate change, nuclear war, artificial intelligence gone rogue. For humans to survive, I believe we must have the preparations in place within 100 years.
News on. This is fascinating.
But where next? Our species has evolved to live on Earth, so our new home must be very similar. It must be a similar-sized rocky planet, with similar gravity. It must have an atmosphere, with just the right amount of oxygen, and crucially, it must be the right distance from its star, that water exists as a liquid. A journey of 2,000 years isn't impossible. We could send spaceships, where successive generations live and die in space. It might not sound pleasant, but theirs would be the sacrifice for the furthering of our species. Their descendants would be the ones who ultimately colonized Proxima b. Many of the reasons I think humans need to leave the Earth are down to the way we have used technology, pollution, climate change, and even overpopulation spring to mind. In the next 100 years, we will embark on our greatest ever adventure. Our destiny is in the stars. Space, here we come. For me, it's not a question of whether we will become an interstellar species, but only a question of when.
The inspirational words of Stephen Hawking, a long time ago, ladies and gentlemen, talking about what may have to happen here. But it's a shame, Kenneth, don't you think? We really don't have to leave yet, but that was his words, and what you're talking about is maybe ways to solve these problems so we don't have to push off into deep space.
Well, that's interesting. You brought Stephen Hawking up a couple of times in the conversation here.
Yes.
So back in 2017, when I was writing this book, in the preface, which is now the opening sentence to the book, I had stated that within the next 100 years, the odds that mankind will experience a major destruction of its civilization begin to approach 100%. This course can be altered. So what's interesting is I had come out with that in 2017, and about 3 or 4 years later, Stephen Hawking said almost exactly the same thing.
Yes, parallel times.
At any given time, hundreds of people on the planet have the same idea, right? So it was just kind of fascinating to me. And his point about space exploration is also, I delve into that in the book, and which offers just a tremendous potential to heal ourselves. Because when we turn our energies and our efforts and our finances away from militarization into the exploration of space, we redirect our consciousness. So, and that is another opportunity to take the military industrial defense industry in a different direction.
Yeah.
Because
very
if
interesting.
you maintain their profit, they're much more willing to do that.
No, you say it so well, and the details are within the book, The Way to World Peace. Let's continue with the callers. If there have been there are many people here on the line. Let's say good morning. They've been patient. Michael in New Jersey, you're on with Kenneth Paul Callison. And what say you on this wintry morning?
Yeah, pretty much things aren't the way they should be, because between religion and education, which I believe are the two most causes of war and death. Now, how many times have one group of people tried to kill another because their religion is different from the one the victor is practicing?
Right.
Number two, take the most educated people, the most educated country, technologically, scientifically, in Western Europe. Which country was it? Germany. Germany didn't only go to war once, not twice, but 3 times with the rest of Western Europe and the world. Let's go to Asia. What country was the most educated in Asia? Japan. Japan, the people were more educated than in China, India, and Indochina. They went to war. Educated people have the philosophy, the idea that we are superior to these other countries, therefore we have the right to take them over and rule them. Now, will people's ideas change? I don't know. But if you look at past history, over and over, when the Romans were the most superior group of people, and they were the most intelligent, the most educated in weaponry, they took over most of Europe and part of Asia. Anytime a country is very well educated, it gives them a superiority complex, which encourages them to take over the weaker countries, and in many cases, kill most of the people, so there won't be any chance for the people to rebel against.
Well, Michael, you've said a whole lot there, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. Let's get Kenneth's response to this, and we appreciate your call here on this snowy, wintry morning, and thank you for being with us. Kenneth, interesting observations here from, just listen to these great callers that we get here. It's amazing.
Well, and I do address this in the book, and actually I don't know, he couldn't have read the book yet, but
yes, he's pretty much spot on, right?
He's spot on a couple of things. Because if you look at the history of war, it's almost always caused by either feelings of superiority or inferiority. And that is the part of the deterrence cycle. So deterrence doesn't deter war. We've used deterrence for 10,000 years, and we've had 10,000 years of war. Deterrence deters peace. And all nations tell their populations, we're the strongest, we're the best country, we take care of our population better than anybody, and we're leading the world. So that political rhetoric is pretty common across all nations.
Yes, but well said.
Yeah, and that has a consequence. That's part of the addiction cycle again, the propaganda. There is a big issue, in my opinion, with fear, propaganda, self-fulfilling prophecy. Those are all interlinked.
Well said. Let's go to Martin. He's been patient in upstate New York. You're on with Kenneth Paul Callison. Good morning to you. How you doing?
Hello there, Dr. Sky. Hey, how you doing?
You're doing good.
Good. Kenneth, I guess you're a sort of a guy who knows all about peace. I like to know, what are you going to propose to the radical Islamic terrorists who who, if they had nuclear weapons, they would kill everyone on the planet so they could go to where they go to get the 72 virgins, and they don't care who they kill. They kill their own people, as they're doing right now in Iran. They kill their own people who stand up to them. So how are you going to sell this idea about peace to them?
Very good question there, Martin. I think that's very apropos, because when we have extremists in the world that want to kill you and I, Kenneth, you got the floor on this one. Appreciate your call there, Martin. You'll have to take the answer off air.
Well, and he brings up a good point, but what he's really trying to drill down to is how do you diffuse hatred and anger, whether it's religious or whether it's a society that feels entitled or whatever. But it doesn't really, you and I don't have to do this, and here's why. Because this transition, our destiny awaits us and our enlightenment. And once you get about 3.5% of a population that is adopting a new behavior, a new way of thinking, that will start to snowball. So yes, even if we were to have world peace, that doesn't mean there wouldn't be some aberrant warlord or some faction that tries to destroy that. We have to be prepared for that. And Gandhi knew this. He was able to educate the people of India into a non-violent resistance, even though the British Empire was extremely brutal. So non-violence may be hard to explain or even to unfold, but it does work better. And even
I look at it this way, Kenneth. Sorry to cut you short here, but it's like this: peace through strength is obviously something that you'd have to have, and I certainly support it when you have these terrorist rogue organizations around the world. And Martin is so correct. What's to stop one of those people if that's not the way he said it? It's just horrible that if they get their hands on one of these things, they could care less. They want to see us wiped off the earth. But the whole concept of peace, it would be, I think, more difficult. How would you teach those people to follow what you're talking about here? Wouldn't that not be the biggest challenge of mankind, would you say? Well,
some of what you're saying when you say, for instance, those people, there are certainly going to be people that are extreme in any culture.
Agreed.
There are people in the United States who think we should take a preemptive action and just take the Middle East off the map. But the majority of Americans don't feel that way.
Of course, right.
So there will be groups. How we can certainly deal with them together much better than we can separately.
Sure.
So we confuse power with force. Power is internal, force is external.
Much more, ladies and gentlemen, on the Dr. Sky Experience. Your calls are welcome here. We do appreciate you and your opinions. And our number here is 1-800-848-9222. We've just about scratched the surface with what our special guest has got to say here. And in the last half hour of hour number 2, you will be hearing all about that. And it even goes into dimensionality and things in the science realm that you may find very, very interesting. At least I do. And I'm hoping that everybody out there within the sound of our voices, again, 1-800-848-9222, as people dig in deeper into this particular morning in the deepest part of winter. Hopefully you're safe and secure off the roads, and you're listening here to Talk Radio 77 WABC. Not only to this show, ladies and gentlemen, but to all the great hosts 24/7 that you tell us you like so much. A radio station that's been around for 104 years and still climbing the charts and moving strong. And a special thanks to owner and operator John Katsimatidis, and from the executive staff, Chad Lopez, for giving me the opportunity to sit behind this particular microphone, a show called the Dr. Sky Experience. We'll be back with our special guest, Kenneth Paul Callison, right after these important announcements.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Thank you, legendary performer Dionne Warwick, chiming in with the Dr. Sky Experience. If we go to the world population counter, we find out today, births as of this particular moment in space-time, 355,777, and ascending at the rate of probably, 100 per minute. Those that passed on to the infinite today on this calculator, 167,670,000 individuals passed on to the infinite, and the population of the world grew, at least today, by 188,000 souls as we continue. As Dionne Warwick said, obviously what we need right now is love, sweet love. Kenneth Paul Callison, don't you think that's important? I think that's the understatement of the year, right? There you go.
I think that's one of the keys.
You better believe it, my friends. Let's continue with the callers because they rule here on this show. Let's say good morning to John in Long Island. You're on with Kenneth Paul Callison. How you doing on this snowy morning?
Get ready. But I hope my conversation is in the flow of the topic of the show. But I remember years ago I was speaking to a gentleman who was a Jehovah's Witness, and the topic was about children who are suffering disease and so forth. He says, disease is the imperfection of man. And it stuck in my head. We are imperfect, and we're always striving to be perfect, but that trying to be perfect has a counter effect on humanities. And, we live in a state of this trying to make things perfect. We live in envies and we don't know how to actually be human. So I just find it interesting that we strive to be perfect, but yet it's a counter effect to it. And I don't know what your thoughts on that, but I just want to bring up this conversation.
No, you bring up some good things, John. Kenneth, this is fascinating stuff. It lights the fires here as far as the Inquisition. And then, people are interested in this. So please respond.
Well, I would say that our behavior, our thoughts, our reactions, our fears are signs that we're struggling. That may be imperfect. Our souls are not imperfect. The soul of mankind is a reflection of God, so it can't be imperfect. Now, our behavior, our understanding, our level of enlightenment, that's a different matter. We were talking a moment ago about love. So, and the difference between force and power, and love being the most powerful force. If you could condense love to a liquid, one single drop would heal every single person and every single problem the species has.
Where do I buy some of that, Kenneth?
You can probably find it on a late night show.
Or one of those as seen on TV in the 800 number, and you can get one half price, just pay shipping and handling, right? There you go.
They sell everything else. It's only a matter of time.
Right. Unbelievable. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the power of love. It's in what? In just weeks, the day of love. Shouldn't the day of love be every day of the year, right? Not just Valentine's Day, but it's a pretty interesting story. Let's move on to some things that are really cerebral here, and I know you're the author of this amazing book. Let's talk a little bit about this whole thing. What is the fifth dimension that you described? And this is fascinating because we talk with so many scientists. Just the last two programs we've had, we've been talking about quantum physics and particle physics, very deep stuff. And I want to hear from you. What do you talk about? What does this mean, the fifth dimension?
Well, I could talk about that for the last half hour of the program, so I'll just have to give you kind of a 30,000-foot view.
You're doing fine.
So
go right ahead.
The fifth dimension is really a higher state of collective consciousness. It's beyond fear and polarity and separation. It's the next evolutionary step. And in that step is based on compassion, awareness, enlightenment, and so forth. So where this comes from is light, as we know it, is composed of both particle and wavelength matter.
Exactly.
So it's logical that thought is also composed of particle and wavelength matter, since thought is what gave rise to light in the first place. So if thought is composed of matter, it's theoretically possible that it has mass. Just like subatomic particles, you can't see them, but you can see where they've been. You can see their tracks in a collider. So when we see the world that humanity has built, we're witnessing the combination of all the thoughts that produced it, our buildings, our cars, our wars, our advancements in medicine. So the movement of mass through space, as according to Einstein, will affect time. So therefore, the movement of thought through space will also affect time.
Yes.
So
we were getting into deep conversations about what is
time. That's
time.
just the Reader's Digest version. But
No, and I appreciate the short, I appreciate the brevity and the details. But this is interesting because obviously shifting gears here to the more quantum side. If we look at space, people, as we, may have been taught, they thought that was correct, that gravity is just simply you hold something and you drop it. It's the gravity, the Earth is pulling it down. But Einstein said, not to get into too deep a conversation, that gravity is the warpage of space-time, and it's the weakest of the basic four fundamental forces. So if you look at electromagnetism, if you look at the weak and strong nuclear force, and not to get into too many boring details here, but they are fascinating, we find gravity to be the weakest of all. But the whole thing about dimensionality is very interesting because many scientists are saying, please jump in on this, Kenneth, that we're only seeing 4 or 5% of the entire world that we see in this particular world that's so fascinating. So maybe there are different planes out there that the human, the mind hasn't been able to explore. It's just an amazing story. Shifting gears a little bit to subjects that are, phenomenal.
Well, the last research I read indicated that scientists have identified 9 different dimensions.
Correct. All right.
And, of course, there's a whole concept of the multiverse as well.
Right. For those listeners that would like to get into this deeper, we give you a little inspiration always, as our guests give us major inspiration. But according to the potential for a 5th dimension, if you look at it really deeply, Kenneth, there's something called the Kaluza-Klein theory. And we'll just say it again, the Kaluza-Klein theory. Not to dig too much into this, there's another dimension added to the 4th dimension, which is 3 spatial and 1 temporal, but that dimensional thing that's added in the 5th is just something like it goes into a concept called string theory, which may yet be the deepest of all these particles that maybe hold the whole universe together. And what about collective thought and all the things about consciousness and reality? And you bring a lot of those subjects in depth into the book, The Way to World Peace. Very interesting. Yeah, this is fascinating stuff. Anything else you'd like to add to that about this dimensionality thing that people need to hear?
No, we get into several things that are kind of related to that in the book on vibration and energy fields and so forth. Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Yeah. It's amazing. All the things we don't know that in our busy lives run by the sun, now we look deeper into this whole thing. Spirituality, science, the quantum theory. But let's go back to the nitty gritty, the basics here. What would you say to somebody who'd say, Kenneth, I love you as a guy here listening to you, but maybe these ideas are too idealistic. And what would you say to somebody being respectful from both sides of this conversation?
Well, you do hear this, but we've always heard it. You're just a dreamer, or you're just a hopeless optimist.
Right.
Well, everything that's ever been accomplished has been accomplished by dreamers. All the scientific discoveries and engineering and poetry and art and music and everything has really all the progress we've made has been because of dreamers. We were told, not to sail over the ocean. You'll fall off the edge of the earth, or exactly. you can't fly. Flight is impossible.
Yeah.
Now we're told peace is impossible. So the dreamers have been the ones to advance us. And then you have also 4 different kinds of rationale, justification or ways of thinking, let's say. So you have like person A, and they will approach an opportunity or a problem and they'll say, well,
that's too high. That's so unreachable. There's no point in trying. Then you have person B, and their point of view is, well, this is really important. We need more study, and they never actually get to any. They just study it. They never actually get to implementing it. And then you got the third type of person C, and they just focus on the problems. Well, look at all these problems that would keep us from reaching this goal, and all their attention goes to the problems. And then you have person D, that they analyze the issue, they understand and respect the problems, but they form plans and they take action. And they're much more driven because they don't employ the excuses that those three types of behavior do.
Interesting. Well said. Ladies and gentlemen, still time as we move to the top of hour number 2, moving at the speed of light as this radio broadcast is coming to you. 1-800-848-9222. In case you're just joining us, never too late to be part of the conversation. Our special guest, Kenneth Paul Callison, his book just days old as far as to get your hand copy on. Get a hand, copy yourself. The Way to World Peace, an idea whose time has come. Very important depth of observation here. And we got about 2 minutes before the break. So what do you want people to get out of this book? If somebody asked you on the street and they just looked at this book and they said, what do you want to get out of this? Tell you, what would be your answer? The message.
Well, hopefully they will gain some understanding and some empowerment and some hope. They will feel hope. And perhaps they will be motivated to get involved, to go to the nonprofit website and, just the membership's free, get a regular monthly newsletter, engage in social media. So this book is to motivate the human race to achieve its potential.
Well, notable and very honorable things that people out there can do, and to go and find out more about Kenneth Paul Callison's website. It's atimeforhumanity.org, atimeforhumanity.org. I'm looking at it as we speak here live across the nation and the world. Very interesting and lots of positive things that are taking place here in which people hopefully can change the world one step at a time. And again, all the spirituality that we're talking about here, it's very important because, as Melvin said, he was one of our callers in hour number 1. Basically, he was summarizing this point, and I think we all agree, right, Kenneth, that we should treat people with dignity and humanity. But again, treat that person, not in any other way, but by their character. And if you're going to do something to harm people, that's horrible. You have to have a way to stop that and not necessarily be the person who's angry or want to kill anyone. But the point is, it's a very interesting conversation, deep as it is, as we move through the deepest part of winter, ladies and gentlemen, here on Talk Radio 77 WABC with the Dr. Sky Experience. And with that, we will be right back as we move to the top of hour number 2.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Biblical signs to the end of days. As we all pray for peace, the expression in Latin would be si vis pacem para bellum. Sad to say, the translation is pray for peace, but prepare for war. But is that really what we need to do? Our special guest, Kenneth Paul Callison, offers a different solution. But what are some of those biblical signs to the end of days? Religious deception, wars and rumors of war, famines, pestilences, disease epidemics, earthquakes, signs in the heavens, and lawlessness. And not to be negative, wow, that's powerful stuff. So we need peace, and we need it now. Please continue, and welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted you to comment more. The positivity of this is people need to look deeper into themselves, but it's more than that. World governments obviously need to make changes, and I'm hoping that can happen, but let's be realistic. What would be the first thing you would start doing if you could just say, hey, now we're going to work toward peace? Here's the first thing we need to do of all the things that you talk about in your book. What's the most important thing that even individuals and governments can start doing?
Well, as far as my role, I'm just a messenger, but as far as an individual's role, First off, they have to, but I think we have to accept some things about ourselves that we haven't yet realized. The value of our species, what we can accomplish together, the concept of enlightenment and love, and how do we use those things to accelerate our species. So I address this in the chapter called a Venturi. So a Venturi is a narrow passage in an hourglass, a jet engine, capillaries, human birth canal. So if you would picture, there's a diagram in the book, but since we're on radio, picture, say, an hourglass on its side. Mm-hmm. Anything that moves through a Venturi, gases, liquids, solids, there's this back pressure, this inertia to prevent it from passing through that. So it takes some kinetics, some force. Mm-hmm. Once it gets into that narrow passage, it speeds up. So this is also true with consciousness. So once our consciousness gets through that Venturi, it expands on the other side. So right now we're on, say, the left side of the Venturi. And what we're experiencing for 10,000 years is all the things we've been talking about. Poverty and war and crisis and degradation of the environment and so forth. That's just noise. This movement of humanity, of the movement of man's mind upon the earth, we are entering the Venturi. We will experience the birth of humanity unto itself. This is our birth. We've been in gestation for 10,000 years. We haven't been born yet. Our species has not realized its enlightenment because we have not yet passed through that Venturi. But we are very close to entering it. And then you will find time speed up. You will find communication and love expanding. Once we're through that Venturi, our consciousness expands. You will experience the most peaceful, blissful silence you can imagine. And we will have long forgotten about the noise.
No, you say it so well, and that's exactly what I'd love to see in everybody out there experiencing this in their life. But let's move on to this other subject and just kind of get it before the top of the hour and the clock runs out. You say technology amplifies intention, but it does not correct it. That's a powerful statement. Define that in better terms than I just said, because that is interesting. Technology basically cannot save us.
No. Well, I think it was Albert Einstein that said technology is like an axe in the hands of a pathological criminal.
Wow. Yeah.
So technology is great for making life more comfortable or increasing our communication or space travel or any of the other wonderful things we can do with technology. But it won't solve the longing in our heart.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And then we go on to the thing about AI. Good, bad, indifferent, nefarious, wonderful. Just give us your take on this whole thing, because so many people are concerned out there, rightfully so, about this genie in the box, some describe it as, or this most wonderful gift bestowed upon humankind that, well, you kind of ask it something and it gives you an answer. It's like that genie in the bottle. But tell us more about AI in your opinion and how maybe this can help solve world peace. Who knows? Maybe the other direction. Who knows?
Well, I address it a little bit in the book. And, of course, everybody's concern is, Skynet's going to take over and it'll be an experience like the Terminator.
Yes.
So, of course, that's what everybody goes to. I don't think that particularly will happen, but there is a danger in turning over our defense systems to AI, and only not because we couldn't, quote, unplug it, but because AI has such potential to make decisions in a fraction of a second before we have time to reason. So the U.S. Defense, I think it's U.S. Defense Preparedness Agency, has already stated that they are going to be engaging AI for a lot of the defense decisions and programs and operations. That does concern me because we are taking an existential threat that we're creating to ourselves, but turning it over to a machine. So it's just that we may not be able to keep up with it, and we're not providing enough of a human element to that decision-making process.
Interesting stuff. Let me ask you a couple of final questions before the clock runs out. Of all these individuals, Kenneth, that you've studied, and we have all studied out there, the peacemakers as they're called, who comes to mind as your, and I don't want to use the word favorite, but who pretty much is one that you've really had total respect for in all the things that individual man or woman was saying?
Oh, I have always been very enthralled with Albert Einstein, both as a peace activist and as a scientist. But Mahatma Gandhi, certainly incredibly enlightened human being. The teachings of Christ, the teachings of Buddha, even the music of Paul Simon. The Sounds of Silence is an incredible song.
You bet. Very powerful.
Very, very profound. Mm-hmm. So I have a number of quote heroes or whatever, but in different areas. So science and being human, maybe Albert Einstein, and in theology, maybe Buddha, and but these individuals have really made. I think they've guided us. We have not paid very close attention sometimes to what they're telling us. Sometimes we lose the message because we get wrapped up in ourselves.
Well, the time has almost come to say goodbye for the moment, and it's never a long goodbye. It's always a short one for all of our guests and the listeners. But here's something interesting as we look. One of the most prolific things I'm getting out of your book here, it's a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, from Kenneth Paul Callison, that the atomic scientist clock, which was gave us more and more minutes, say it again, and sadly to say, it's down to about 89 or 90 seconds before 0 hour. And that's a really powerful statement there. And hopefully smarter minds in the world can look at ways to, prevent this from happening. But like some of the callers have said, right, Kenneth? What if you get some crazy person out there or group that has nothing but annihilation and hatred? We got to be prepared, and that's that Latin expression, si vis pacem para bellum, pray for peace but prepare for war. I know it's harsh to some, but how do you respond to all that? I mean, good things for peace, but we also have to be protected. And as a proud American, I just hope that we can find ways to keep our country going strong, like other people around the world, I'm sure, want theirs.
Well, I think if you're concerned with some crazy person doing something, it can kind of make you crazy. And I think if you base your decisions on what somebody else might do, you sacrifice your power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think if you want war, you prepare for war. And if you want peace, you prepare for peace.
No, it's well said. So don't inhale the breath of the vapors of hatred, obviously. You need to have the other side of the coin, which comes through loud and clear with the conversation that we're having with you. Kenneth, I appreciate your time. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I appreciate your time.
I was just going to say, don't get involved in the degenerative cycle of fear.
You better believe it.
Yeah.
That's it. Learn to be.
Oh, by the way, I love the name of your program, Theater of the Mind. I think that is great.
Well, let me say this. I'm not the first person to use it, but I say it in all sincerity because this is radio, and that's exactly what this is. You're sitting in a theater, you're listening to a broadcast with a person and guests, and I say this proudly, a little on the humble side here. It's not so much about the host. This is not a narcissist platform. It's about giving those individuals out there who are listening, as the owner and operator John Katzimatidis has told me many, many times, let's open our minds to the great mysteries that are out there. And I think we're doing that, and I hope it's becoming successful to everybody listening. But thank you for the kindness. Your website for Kenneth Paul Callison is atimeforhumanity.org. An interesting show, ladies and gentlemen. We thank him, and let's do that again in the future, Kenneth. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Now we turn and pass the torch of conversation to who? T.J. McCormick for The Other Side of Midnight as he takes you deeper into this winter morning. Stay warm, stay safe, stay off the roads, and this will pass, ladies and gentlemen. Mother Nature, at her best or worst, you be the judge, but be on the side of the way to world peace. We'll see you next week. Have a good week, health and happiness, and of course, clear skies once those storms move away.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Busted. The reviews are in.
Awesome.
You wanted more Joe Concha. And we heard you. More Joe. More show.
We're talking to you. Under promise and over deliver.
Joe Concha. Weeknights at 9. Plus Sunday mornings at 11 on 77 WABC.
Jimmy Kimmel no longer tries to be funny. Not that he ever really was.
Joe Concha. Weeknights at 9. Plus Sunday mornings at 11.
Democrats defending cocaine coming into the country.
The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.